The pleasure to be here. Thanks so much, Mark. I saw in chat many prayers for peace, which I know many of us hold in our hearts. And so I just wanted to invite us to arrive by singing one word, shalom, a prayer for peace. At this time when sometimes it's just hard to find the words, we can rest in this one word, shalom. So take a moment to arrive. You may want to look at the shining faces on the screen for a second, and then turn inward to our tender hearts, to our yearning for shalom, for peace, for wholeness, for ease in our hearts and in our world. Shalom, 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 shalom. Taking a moment to breathe into that yearning for peace, for wholeness. And inviting in any experience of peace, of shalom, that is available to you right now. Breathing that in. And with that, we'll begin. So nice to be here with all of you. In our Jewish holiday cycle and in our world, we are in the midbar, in the unknown. As Aviva Zornberg puts it, we are in the place and the state of bewilderment. In this frightening, senseless unknown, Jewish tradition offers us the practice of the Omer. We are invited to dwell, perhaps uncomfortably, in this particular moment, to ritually count each day. And each day of the Omer, we are invited to explore in our own experience the nuances of various aspects of divinity that are also reflected in our own hearts. Chesed, unbounding loving kindness, was our focus last week, for the first week of the Omer. And this week, it's Gevura, boundaries, judgment, power. Maybe a little bit of a harder one for many of us than Chesed to explore. And within this week, on this day, the aspect or nuance within Gevura on which we focus is Tiferet, the compassionate balance between love and judgment, between multiplicity and oneness. And the hope and promise of the Omer practice, according to the Mea Shiloach and other Hasidic commentators, is that if we pay attention day by day, doing the hard work of refining and clarifying and opening and softening and balancing all of these aspects of our own hearts and of divinity itself, that when we arrive at Shavuot and at Sinai, we'll have made ourselves a vessel that can receive and integrate the divine presence and the Torah that is waiting for us there. And in a way, this is also the hope and promise of our meditation practice all year long. We may come to our sit in a state of confusion or pain or bewilderment or fear, and we are invited to just be present with this moment and then with the next. We make ourselves open, hefker, as we are told to do in the wilderness. Our awareness available for whatever aspects of the heart, mind, and body are most in need of refining, clarifying, opening, and softening. And the hope is that in doing so, we'll have made ourselves a vessel, a mishkan, that can better receive the face of the divine and the wisdom that may appear at any moment, in any context, in our daily interactions. But many of us, perhaps myself definitely, are finding it difficult these days to access the sacred, the good, to receive the insight and clarity, no matter how much we try to attend to the present moment and to the fear, grief, and confusion that may arise in our hearts. Having left Egypt and Passover in our year cycle, we may still feel stuck in the narrowness and the narrow heart and mind more often than we would like. I want to share with you today a piece of the Zohar. It's called the Idra Rabbah, that has been really helpful to me for several years, especially in moments when I feel like I should be able to soften, to open, to receive the face of the divine in another person or situation, and I just can't. The Idra suggests that there's also an aspect of God, God's self, that gets stuck and is unable to soften. It's not just me. This reactive part of God shows up at Sinai, where we're headed, in response to the building of the golden calf, this profound break between God and the people. So Yud-He Vav-He, this God of judgment, is so angry in this moment, so caught in unmitigated deen or judgment or gevura, this sphira that we're working with this week, that God lacks the capacity in that moment to be present with the people. And God says in this moment, well, I'll give you your offspring, a land flowing with milk and honey, but I will not go in your midst, since you are a stiff-necked people, lest I destroy you on the way. This is in the Torah in Exodus. And it's as if God is saying, I am so angry at you right now that I can't even look at you. I can't be in relationship with you. I can't be near you. And this aspect of the divine is also called Ze'er Anpin in Aramaic, the young or impatient one. The Idra describes it as red-faced, red-eyed, tight. So this is a part of the divine that some of us may be able to relate to right now. But thankfully, the Idra offers another image of the divine. This is the Holy Ancient One, eternal, steadfast, loving, and patient. This is the God of oneness, who, the Idra suggests, is constantly offering a soothing, healing gaze, which is always available to this other part of the divine, the stuck God of judgment, and to us. If we are just able to soften our stiff necks and look up from our fixed point of view to receive this loving gaze. And Jordan, if you can share the source sheet for a moment. I just want to bring you a little piece of this Idra. So, thanks. And so this is text 1 where it says healing gaze. So when Ze'er Anpin's face, this god of judgment, looks up and gazes upon the face of the Holy Ancient One, all is called Erech Apin, which may sound a little bit familiar. It's the Aramaic for Erech Apayim, which we receive later in this scene with the golden calf, where Moses says, God, I want to know you. I want to see your face. And God shares this aspect of the 13 attributes of compassion, one of which is erech apayim, long-suffering, patient. So all is called erech apayim, long-suffering, vast countenance. Imagine this soft, open, spacious face. What is meant by erech apayim? Healing countenance, where there's no healing in the world except when they, these parts of the divine, gaze face to face. Thanks, Jordan. So take a moment and just take that in. This gaze of the divine. And the Zohar offers many beautiful images for this whole healing, nourishing aspect of the divine. The river of light that flows from Eden to water the garden of multiplicity and materiality. Also in the Idra, the mother's milk that we receive from the Sphira of Bina, the divine mother, the 50th gate at which we arrive at Shavuot after our 49-day journey through the Omer. So there are lots of beautiful images of this oneness that beams down, showers down to us. And I want to invite you in your practice today to be open to receive whatever qualities of this boundless divinity may show up for you. But the gaze is actually something, this healing gaze is actually something that we can both be open to receiving, and we can also embody and bring to whatever arises in our sit through the quality of our own awareness. The gaze of the Ancient One and our gaze in our practice is ideally constant, spacious, loving, even the Idra says smiling, even when the rest of us might not be. And so as we move into our sit, I want to invite you to consider for yourself, what are the rigid, fried places in us that need this loving, healing gaze of the Ancient Holy One? When and how might we soften enough to receive that gaze? And what is the quality of our own gaze, our own awareness, as we come face to face, panim el panim, this healing stance, with the parts of our hearts that are in need of care? So with that, let's turn inward. Perhaps closing your eyes to allow that inner gaze to be more available. Or if that's not comfortable, having a soft gaze. Feeling your feet on the ground, the chair supporting you. Softening shoulders and face. It says in the Idra that Ze'er Anpin's face becomes elongated in response to this loving, healing gaze of the Ancient One. So as we drop our jaw, our face elongates and softens. Notice the breath wherever it's most available to you. Just receiving. allowing whatever arises in your field of awareness to be held in the loving, spacious, peaceful, healing gaze of your own awareness. So we'll sit like this for about 8 minutes. You get distracted or that spacious, stable awareness doesn't feel available to you in this moment, you may want to play with opening to that ancient gaze of oneness, receiving the gaze of oneness from the ancient Holy One. for the last moment of our sit today, returning our awareness from wherever it's been to this precious body, to this breath. Holding ourselves with love.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Margie Jacobs, leading us in such a beautiful practice to bring us into Shabbat. And let's seal the practice as we do each day with an opportunity for those of us who are in mourning or observing a yahrzeit, or for whom it's the custom to join in the Kaddish, to recite it together. And if you're not reciting Kaddish, to continue with your practice by being present, offering that loving gaze to those who are, that healing gaze to those who are. You can put the name or names of those who are honoring today in the chat now or after we recite Kaddish. And thanks to Jordan for sharing the words on the screen. If you are reciting Kaddish, please join me by rising in body or in spirit, and you can unmute at this time. Yitgadal, Yikadash Shemei Rabba, Yalma Dibra Hikute, V'yamlich Malchute, V'chayecho Yomecho, Chaye B'chol Beit Yisrael, Ba'agalat, Bizman Kariv, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabba Mevarach, Ve'olam Rameh Almaya, Yitbarach, V'yishtabach, V'yitpa'ar, V'yitramam, V'yitnaseh, V'yitadar, V'yitaleh, V'yitalal, Shemei Tekudsha, B'richu, La'ela Mikol Gerchata V'shirata, Tush B'chata V'nechamata, Da'amiran Ba'alma, V'imru, Amen. Yehi Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya, V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'imru, Amen. Oseh Shalom B'mromav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael, V'al Kol Yoshvei Tevel, V'imru, Amen. Friends, thanks so much for joining us to sit into Shabbat together. And if you're leaving us now, I want to wish you a sweet and restorative Shabbat. We'll be back on Monday. Rabbi Mira Weil will be leading us from Israel to kick off our week of practice next week. So if you're leaving us now, we hope to see you then and have a good and sweet Shabbat and a good weekend. We'll see you soon. And if you're staying on, as I hope you can, you're welcome just to continue to sit with that image of that loving, healing gaze that Margie offered. Or join us for conversation, for questions, for sharing reflections on your experience with the practice. If you have a question you'd like to put to Rabbi Margie, please preface it by writing question in the chat. And should have said this at the outset, but Rabbi Margie is a spiritual coach. She's also a facilitator of the Jewish studio process. Some of you may be familiar with the creative process of engaging in creativity as a spiritual practice through a Jewish lens. And thanks to Jordan for putting the link to all of Rabbi Margie's offerings that are in the chat. And I will keep an eye on the chat. If folks have questions, let's bring you in, Margie. Thanks. Thank you so much. For those who are not familiar, first of all, the Zohar is the central text of Jewish mysticism, written, scholars think, in the early Middle Ages in Spain, and the Idra Rabbah that you referenced today is one of the most esoteric of a very esoteric text to begin with. So I want to say, first of all, kol hakavod for making something that is so, that can be very challenging. I hope accessible. Um, this idea of it's interesting also because, as you heard, IJS is offering this course by Rabbi Tobias Spitzer on metaphors for God, non-anthropomorphic metaphors for God, non-human metaphors for God. And you can't get more anthropomorphic or more human metaphors than in the Zohar, and it's particularly in this section, which focuses so much on the face of God. And it's a masculine face with a beard, and there's um, given all that, this idea, let's really focus on the essence of the teaching here, which is on this healing face, the what it's just described in this section as erech apin, um, um, uh, patient. It's translated as patient, but literally, like you said, it has to do with the nose. It's really, and I was thinking that length of breath and long nosed, like as and something that we all have access to, right? Noticing the length of our nose, whether it's short or long, whether our breath is contracted or expansive, is fits in very well with the question of what's a healing disposition, what's a loving disposition, as you're describing.
Can I add to that?
Yeah, please.
So actually, Danny Matt suggests that literally this arich anpin, that long nose, it's the time that it takes to flare the nostrils. So it's someone who is patient, meaning they're not going to flare their nostrils quickly. Whereas the Ze'er Anpin, this god of judgment, this reactive god of judgment, is the one who takes a short time to flare their nostrils. So it's about the quality of reactivity on the one hand,
right?
But it's also what you're saying. It's about the softening of the jaw, the elongation of the face, and the length of the breath, and not that we would make the breath do any particular thing in our practice, but typically we might notice that quality of breath, if we're feeling tight emotionally, breath is going to feel like chotzer ruach. It's going to feel short and tight. And that as we sit, we may experience that our breath lengthens and softens, and that reflects a spaciousness, an increased spaciousness in the quality of our awareness. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So I have a question in terms of practice of the gaze. I know for myself, maybe people want to weigh in the chat about how they took the invitation. I went to imagining myself being gazed at by such a face, which is one way to go, right? Like, what does it feel? What for each of us, what does it feel like to be presented with that kind of face, a non-reactive, loving, infinitely patient presence, right? That's communicated, that never closes. It's always there, right? So there's that. And then there's, what we were just talking about, which was noticing our own face, right? And whether our face has those qualities that you're describing. So is this a both and situation, would you say?
I love that question. So what happens basic to the Zohar is that there's this level on high, there's this divine level, and it's reflected in us. And so as we go through these qualities of the Sfirot, and we're actually in the Omer, we're focusing generally on the qualities that are associated with Ze'er Anpin, with this god of judgment. And because it's Tiferet plus the surrounding ones. And so as we're doing our work on those qualities in us, we might imagine that we are actually healing, softening, opening that divine aspect of God. So in us, ideally, we have this same quality of awareness, and that's the witness in meditation, that spacious, stable awareness. But that's not always available. And so part of how I was imagining it as I sat today was that there is this divine, perfect, constant, loving gaze that is always available to us if we're able to soften and receive it. And then it kind of gets pulled through our own heart, our own awareness, so that we can beam that out to the aspects of ourselves that arise, and ideally to those with whom we interact. But when it gets closed, then we have this other resource. It's kind of like when we feel stuck and tight in our lives, and ideally we have people who love us and look at us in that way, and we can borrow their gaze when it's not available to us for ourselves.
Yeah. I imagine it's interesting. People also invite reflections in the chat about this too, about how we react to the idea of being seen in that way, and whether we have experienced that. If we haven't had an experience with that, it might be very difficult to receive that, or we might push it away, or I could exacerbate, whatever kind of that pushing away of it might exacerbate internal tension. Want to get to a question? Do you want to add on to that? I do have a question that's really, I think, a good follow-up to this.
Can I just speak to that
Yeah.
for a second? So
Yeah.
I think what's comforting to me is that doesn't just happen for me, that pushing away, that shutting down, that not being able to receive the gaze, that happens in God. And that the Idra opens with this moment of crisis where it says, Et lasot ladonai, it's time to act for this Yud He Vav He, ki heferu Toratecha, because your Torah, this aspect of the divine, has been broken, violated, made ineffectual. Like that, there's this break that has happened within God's self, and this breakdown, so that that aspect of God can't receive the gaze, just as happens to us sometimes, and needs our help, needs our healing of that face.
So that's a good segue into this question from Rana about the God who is quicker to judge, which, as she says, feels more like a human face, but it's kind of radical and maybe confusing to think about. That's one of the faces of God. That kind of, we'd like to reject that, but so maybe you can say a little bit more about how is that a face of God, and what do we do, with that?
Right. So I love that it's all in there. All those aspects of what we think of as human qualities, but all these qualities, they're all in this dynamic God of the Zohar. And they change. And so God is not this monolithic thing. God is one, but God is not monolithic. And ideally, the way that it functions is that this middle God of judgment, or that's actually the job of that part of the divine, to interact with the world of multiplicity but informed by that perspective of oneness. So Jordan, you may want to put up that picture now, because that might be helpful. But so God is sitting there in the middle, mediating. Remember, I said the Tiferet, which is essentially this godly Tiferet plus surrounding, is mediating between oneness and multiplicity. So ideally doesn't see the world of multiplicity only as other, and in this good and bad, but really is also always holding that gaze of oneness, where all of the many variations of things that we do that seem wise and unwise, that all of that is ultimately held in a place of connection and a place of wholeness, seeing the whole. And that's what's breaking down in the Idra, is that perspective of oneness in interacting with the world of multiplicity, which includes us.
There is there is godliness in that world of multiplicity. Right?
There's godliness, there's oneness, there's wholeness, there's connection, there's vulnerability that may not be apparent, you know. And you know, those of us who are parents or have children in our lives, like we might know this place where most of the time we can see all of the different things that they do, you know, also holding this place of oneness and love and their wholeness. And then there are the moments when we can't, right? And we have to just take a breath and perhaps look up, receive that gaze of oneness, soften, and then come back. Yeah. And also in our difficult interactions around all kinds of things.
Yeah, well, especially these days.
Yes.
Yeah, Jordan, you could probably take down this share. Now, these days, I think we're seeing the faces that we see, the images of faces that we see are, you know, are the flaring nostril. I think a lot of flaring nostrils, a lot of constriction, a lot of shortness of breath and heat, you know, which is another element that's kind of brought into that into anger.
Yeah, the redness is described as
waxing hot. There's a lot of waxing hot and wrothness these days, right?
And you know, our work in mindfulness is to notice those places in us.
And to hold them. I think really, right, as you're describing, it's holding all of those aspects of ourselves, not pushing them away and not denying them, but holding them, right? That loving, healing gaze. It's such a it is a really powerful image. I mean, even for people, I think, who, you know, struggle with anthropomorphic God metaphor, language and metaphors. It's really something for all of us to sit with, the idea of this ever loving gaze that is always directed in our attention, even when the storm clouds are gathered and times are as rough as they are these days. To have that sense, to be able to tap into that sense.
I want to also invite people, if they're interested in knowing more about the Idra, that our beloved teacher, Dr. Malila Helner Eshed, wrote a whole book on this part of the Zohar that is really beautiful and has informed my work on it.
Yeah, thank you for that. Here I'm going to put a quick. It's called Seekers of the Face. I'll put a link in for people who are interested. It's published by Stanford University Press. And of course, Malila does a lot of teaching for IJS, both for our clergy program and in general. And for those who are interested, I'm also, Jordan, if you don't mind putting the links in to Rabbi Margie's offerings, that would be great. And I'm also putting in our schedule for teachers next week. Looking, as I mentioned, Monday, which is Yom HaShoah, with the observance of Yom HaShoah. Rabbi Mirawai will be leading us. Tuesday, Rabbi Adam Klickfeld. Rosh Chodesh ER. Wednesday, Sarah Waxman of Ethelwell will lead us. On Thursday, Rabbi Robin Damsky. And on Friday, Kat Koren will be leading us from Israel as well. So Margie, as always, thank you so much for this deep and really healing and necessary teaching and practice that we all need so much, especially right now. So thanks for all of that. And Jordan, thanks so much for holding our space, and to each of you for your incredible dedication to your practice and to this community. We thank you for that and wish everyone a sweet and restorative Shabbat, an opportunity to lengthen the breath and to soften the face and be able to see a little bit more clearly what needs to be done. Thanks, everyone. Shabbat Shalom.